In educational research, achieving a massive, statistically significant leap in student performance is incredibly rare. Most interventions yield incremental gains. Yet a recent experiment entirely broke that curve. This anomaly didn't happen in an introductory class. It occurred in an auditing and assurance course, a highly complex, compliance-heavy professional field where abstract concepts dictate real-world outcomes. This table shows the raw empirical proof. The ANCOVA measures post-test scores between a control and experimental group. An F statistic of 69.31 and a p-value under 0.001 translate to a 10.62-point achievement gap. The experimental group scored 11 points higher on average. This generated a partial eta squared effect size of 0.55. In behavioral sciences, an effect size of this magnitude is enormous. The researchers didn't change the underlying curriculum or the textbook. They achieved this gap solely by introducing 10 targeted digital animation modules. An effect size of 0.55 indicates that animation systematically restructures how the human brain organizes and processes dense professional information. Traditional accounting and auditing education relies heavily on dense textbooks, the memorization of regulatory standards, and rote learning of theoretical definitions. This creates a strict cognitive bottleneck. Students can temporarily memorize these rules for an exam, but they struggle to mentally map abstract regulations onto dynamic, real-world business processes. To test a solution to this bottleneck, researchers at Yala Rajabhat University selected 60 Bachelor of Accounting students. They employed a strict quasi-experimental design, cleanly dividing the students into a control and experimental group. Both took a baseline pretest, scoring 39.43 and 39.73 respectively, ensuring functionally identical prior knowledge. From there, instruction diverged. Both received standard lectures, but only the experimental pathway received the specialized animation media alongside the core curriculum. The fact that the control group completely failed to match the experimental cohort's final outcomes isolates text-heavy rote learning as a rigid barrier to advanced analytical reasoning. The massive success of this intervention is anchored in the cognitive theory of multimedia learning, or CTML. CTML posits a strict structural constraint. We have two distinct, limited-capacity brain channels. One handles visual spatial data, the other handles verbal auditory data. Traditional text-only instruction jams the verbal channel with complex auditing rules, overloading the verbal pipeline while the visual processing center remains unutilized. Animation exploits a mechanism called visuospatial working memory to balance this exact cognitive load. Tracking movement across a screen, the brain rapidly builds a kinematic model, an internal representation of a process's exact sequence. Simultaneously, animation helps construct a conceptual model, mapping out the underlying principles and relationships connecting those moving parts. We can see how this works by looking at the actual animation modules deployed in the study. Highly abstract processes, like ensuring compliance with tax laws or supporting executive decision-making, are assigned concrete spatial geometry, character actions, and movement. By distributing the incoming data across both the visual and verbal processing channels and providing a clear spatial temporal logic, the animation does the heavy lifting of mental organization. This frees up the student's working memory to focus on actual analytical reasoning. To engineer this cognitive theory into an actual curriculum, the researchers utilized the ADDIE instructional development framework. Through strict analysis and design phases, they meticulously mapped 10 distinct animation modules to cover some of the most complex topics in the field, including risk assessment, evidence collection, and transaction cycle auditing. To prove this media was a functionally viable tool, rather than just a subjective prototype, the study employed the rigorous E1-E2 efficiency criteria. E1 measures the efficiency of process, meaning how well the media guides the student through the learning steps while they are actually interacting with it. E2 measures the efficiency of product, reflecting the final learning outcomes against a strict 80/80 baseline standard required for instructional media. This table reveals the measured efficiency of the study's 10 modules. The media achieved an E1 process score of 84.90 and an E2 product score of 88.30, placing the intervention well above the required 80/80 threshold. This E1-E2 validation proved the animation intervention was an efficient instructional tool that actively and systematically supported the learning process step by step, which brings us back to the massive divergence in the final testing data. The experimental group achieved a nearly 11-point academic leap over the control group, scoring 84.89 compared to 74.27. Did they score higher simply because watching a video feels more entertaining than reading a textbook? The student satisfaction questionnaire holds the answer. The aesthetic appeal, specifically the appropriateness of images and audio, received the lowest mean score, sitting at 4.68. The highest rated metric wasn't entertainment value, it was content clarity, maxing out at 4.82. This provides a direct empirical link. The academic gains were driven by the mechanical translation of abstract complexity into clear visuospatial logic. The students explicitly recognized the animation's utility as a tool that made the abstract auditing process concrete, sequence-based, and navigable. It gave their brains the exact scaffolding required to pull disorganized data points into a rigorous internal logic. In compliance-heavy professional fields, digital animation functions as a structural cognitive scaffold. Developing sustainable professional competence requires instructional design that moves past the bottleneck of text and aligns with the mechanical reality of how the human brain processes information.